So welcome to lecture number 22, ME210 Fluid Mechanics. We'll start a new topic today, and this topic is titled Viscous Flow in Ducts. Okay, so a brief summary of what we have done till now. So till now we have talked about, we started our discussion with some introduction. Then we talked about fluid statics. Then we talked about integral relations. So instead of talking about what's happening at a given point, we talked about what's happening in a control volume. So that helped us to find out the net force in different directions, the net moment, and so on. And then we moved to differential relations. So in differential relations, we talked about how to find out the complete velocity profile by solving the Navier-Stokes equations for very special cases. We also learned about streamlines and potential velocity potentials. Okay, then we said that it's not always possible to solve theoretically the problem theoretically. So then we talked about dimensional analysis. Okay, so in dimensional analysis, we discussed how we can apply the ideas of scale up by doing experiments on small scale models and then learning from those results and applying them on bigger prototypes. So we don't need to actually make prototypes and test them. Rather, we can test on models and then learn something from it. Okay, this was called dimensional analysis. So in dimensional analysis, the best we could get was the relationship between different non-dimensional parameters. We could not get the actual functional relationship. We could not get the function. We could only get that a certain non-dimensional variable depends on some other non-dimensional variables. Okay. So the next topic is, this topic that we'll discuss now is on the actual application of these ideas that we have learned to specific problems. So in general, what we do is we classify the fluid mechanics problems into two general types. So I'll say two types of flow analyses. So the first type is called internal flows. Okay, so in this case, what's happening is the flow is happening between bounded, or the flow is bounded by certain walls or boundaries. So it is internal. An example would be flow inside a pipe. Okay, so in this pipe, you have so the flow is happening inside the pipe. So the flow is bounded by the walls of the pipe. And the other kind of flows that we talk about is called external flows. In external flows, the flow happens outside a certain solid object. So let's say you have a car. And the car is moving from right to left. So it can be considered as a flow on a car, a static car, which is the flow is happening from left to right. So in this case, the flow is external to the solid object. So we classify these kind of flows as external flows. Okay, these are simply for the convenience of analysis, because the analyses for internal flows, as we'll discuss later in this lecture today, is a bit different from the external flow analyses. Right? So this is the motivation behind classifying the flows into these two types. Okay, so the discussion in this chapter, the viscous flow chapter, this discussion on viscous flow in ducts is about internal flows. Right. So let's talk a bit more about these internal and external flows. So in internal flows, well, let's start with external flows. So in the case of external flow, let's take a situation. Well, it can be this car. So let's say the front side of the car looks is a solid object which is very streamlined. So the front side of the car is quite streamlined, and the flow is happening across it. So when the flow, which was earlier uniform, when it encounters the solid object, it tends to flow around it. So the streamlines will deviate. So the flow, some flow region which is near the flow surface will get affected because of the solid object, and you will see that the flow streamlines will be different from what they were downstream, upstream. But flow away from the solid object will still be uniform. So there is a region around the solid object which is affected, which affects the flow, and this region is called the boundary region. So there is certain region that we can identify. So if the object was not there, if we remove this blue object, then the flow would have been uniform, like we have here. But since we have put this blue solid object on the in the path of the flow, so the flow is it affects the flow, and this region between these two solid black lines is the region that gets affected. But the region beyond this is still the same. It still has that uniform flow of u. Okay. So this is the reason it's called external. So there is some boundary region near the solid walls which gets affected, but beyond that there is no effect of the solid body in the overall bulk flow. Whereas in internal flows, if I take the example of this pipe again, the complete region between the two boundaries, or between in this case it's a circular cross section pipe, so I'll say the complete region between the on the inside of the cylindrical walls is affected by the boundaries. So you will see after some time for a laminar flow profile, and we have discussed that the flow becomes parabolic, and this can be derived from the Navier-Stokes equation, the solution of those equations. So the flow profile is parabolic. So u is a function of r, the radius, the radial coordinate r. So what it tells us is that the flow depends. I mean, the wall has an effect. If there were no walls and you had a uniform flow, so here the flow actually is uniform before it enters the pipe, and then the pipe effects start, and the flow after some distance will become completely parabolic. Okay, so these internal flows are affected by the walls, and hence the effect of viscosity is prominent throughout the cross section of the duct. Right. So it's the effect of viscosity that results in the parabolic flow profile. I mean, if you think intuitively, then these two walls, they're not two walls, but let us say it's a two-dimensional situation. So you have two plates, and the flow is happening between these two plates. So these two plates the plates are bringing in no slip condition, and the layers talk to each other because of viscosity. So we have stopped the flow near the walls, but the center of the flow has to happen because the flow is happening from left to right. So then the flow, the top layers will slow down the bottom layers till the center of the pipe, and then the same happens further downwards. So what we see is that two layers talk to each other because of viscosity. So the effect of viscosity, it permeates throughout the cross section of the pipe. Of course, if you had an ideal fluid, that is the fluid had no viscosity, then you would not see this effect because any two layers cannot talk to each other. So even if the flow on the boundaries has to be stagnant, but the layer just below it can have a very different velocity or a discontinuous jump, right? So the effect of viscosity is prominent throughout the cross section of the duct. And whereas in external flows, that is here, the effect of viscosity is only prominent in this solid black region, in this region. Okay, beyond the region, the effect of viscosity is not prominent because the flow is still behaving the same as it was when the object was not there. So it's as if there is no viscosity outside. Okay. Of course, I mean, the reason the viscosity has an effect is because of the formation of a boundary layer that we briefly talked about earlier, but we'll not discuss that further here right now. We'll have a full discussion, a quantitative discussion on boundary layers in the next chapter, which is actually titled boundary layer analysis. Okay. So the discussion in this chapter is about internal flows, particularly flow inside pipes. Right. So, well, there's a question as to why is it important to study pipes? The reason is because engineering applications are full of flow inside pipes. So let's have a look at a couple of examples. So here's a pipeline in a factory. You can see that it has plenty of different sizes and kinds of pipes. So you can see, let's see. Let's use a black color. So you can see you have, for example, a pipe here, and then you have connections between two kinds of pipes. This is a different kind of pipe or duct as compared to this one. And then you can see all sort of sizes and diameters and lengths of pipes and connections between the pipes as well. Okay, so it's very important to understand how flow happens inside a pipe or inside pipes. And then again here on the left hand side you have flow of oil in a pipeline that is on the sea. So you can see intercontinental pipelines which are used to transport oil. So again, very important to study pipes. On the bottom right you have here you have ducts. So these ducts are again very commonly used in HVAC, heating, ventilation and air conditioning systems in buildings. Almost all the buildings will have this kind of ducting. In fact, you may have seen this in your North Campus rooms. On the top, we have these square or rectangular cross-section ducts, which are used for transporting hot air. So we have all these kind of pipes and ducts. So it's telling us, it's showing us the importance of studying these kind of piping and ducting systems in engineering. And the next question is, why do we study these piping and ducting? Okay, why study internal flows in mechanical engineering? Okay, so I call it the problem. Okay, what is the problem that we want to solve as mechanical engineers when we study internal flows or flows inside pipes? Okay, so if you think intuitively, what we want is, let's say, water pipeline. So what I want is, I want the water to flow in a pipeline with a certain flow rate. Okay, so the first kind of problem we want to solve is, so given a fluid and desired flow rate, okay, that is Q, we want to find the pressure drop, delta P, or you can also call it pump power. Okay, so a given fluid and a desired flow rate, you would want to find the pump power to let's say, to generate that flow, or let's say to sustain that flow. Okay, that's the first kind of problem that you have, that you want to solve in internal flows. Okay, and the second kind of problem you have is, given a fluid, in most cases the fluid, in most practical cases, the fluid is fixed. You don't change the fluid that you want to transport. That's dependent on the that's application that you're dealing with. So given a fluid and the pressure drop delta P, that is, you know what size or what pressure drop your pump can create, you would want to find the resultant discharge. Okay, so Q is also called discharge. It's the flow rate. So that's the second kind of problem you want to solve. Okay. So that is, I mean, whenever you study, whenever we are discussing different topics in this chapter of viscous flows in ducts, always keep this problem in mind. That's the complete. I mean, that's the whole reason we are studying all this, to be able to understand, to be able to find out the pressure drop or the pump power, how big a pump should we install, so that we can create a certain meter cube per second of flow for a given fluid. Or if you have a certain power of pump that is being applied to a fluid in a given piping system or a ducting system, what will be the resultant flow rate as a result? I mean, what will be the resultant flow rate, Q? Right. Now the question is, why is a pressure drop required? Why do we need a pump? Okay, intuitively you understand why we need a pump, because energy is being lost. But let's discuss that more formally. Why have a delta P? Okay, well, intuitively we know the answer, because there are losses. Or should we say to compensate for the losses? So let's see. Let's apply Bernoulli's equation, the energy balance equation, for a pipe. So we have a pipe. So it has, let's say, we take two cross sections 1 and 2, and we apply the Bernoulli's equation across 1 and 2. So let's assume that Bernoulli's equation is applicable. It's along a streamline, the flow is steady, and so on. So on the left hand side, the total energy is P1 by rho g. So we're talking in terms of head here. So we have transformed all the dimensions into dimensions of length. So we have the pressure energy, or the pressure head, plus the gravitational head, plus the velocity head. Okay. So the flow, let's say, is happening from left to right, and then we have the pressure head, the gravitational head, and the kinetic energy, or the dynamic head, and then we also have the head due to losses. Yeah, losses. Okay, so this is our Bernoulli's equation. Now in this case, let's assume that the pipe is horizontal. So Z1 and Z2 are the same, and by the application of the continuity equation, we can say that the area times velocity on the left hand side at 1 is the same as the area times velocity at 2. So that means V1 is equal to V2. So from that, we can then say that these two also cancel out. So basically what we get is P1 minus P2 by rho g is equal to the losses. So that's the reason we require a delta P. That's the reason you need to put a pump, because it has to compensate for the losses because of different reasons that is happening from 1 to 2. Okay, it is to compensate for these losses. If you had an ideal situation where there was no loss, then you would not require any pump to sustain the flow. Right? And what kind of losses are we talking about here? So let's see that. So this delta P is equal to rho g times H losses. So this is because of the friction between the fluid and the pipe wall. So there is a loss because of the friction that happens between the fluid and the pipe walls, and there are also losses because of friction that is happening inside the fluid. And inside the flow. Okay, so we're talking about these kind of losses. Okay, so this tells us that it's important. I mean, this is the reason we need to talk about the pressure drop. That is the reason we need to relate the pressure drop with your fluid properties as well as the flow rate Q. I mean, that is the reason we need to have a pump to be able to sustain a flow or a certain flow rate. Right. And as I said that it's important to study pipes because the pipes are almost everywhere. So inside your household, you have pipes in your plumbing system. You have gas pipes these days transporting liquefied petroleum gas. You have pipelines in the industry. You have gas pipes or high pressure air. Pneumatic pipelines are used for transporting compressed air, which is used for actuating many valves, and it's basically energy is transported in the factories in the form of compressed air. Then you also have compressed liquid or compressed oil in the hydraulic systems in the factories. So as I said, I mean, there's lots of application of flow in pipes and ducts in the engineering systems. So it is important to study these systems. Right. So we have been able to relate our delta P with H losses. So ultimately, what we will need from this discussion is a relation between the losses that are happening inside. The losses, the two kind of losses we talked about. We'll want to relate this as some function of. We'll have some fluid properties, and then we'll have the flow properties. So let's say. And then we'll have some geometrical parameters. Geometrical parameters we're talking about is, let's say, L, the length of the pipe, the diameter of the pipe. See, these are the two geometrical parameters. And then we're talking about, that's right, geometry. And then we'll say fluid. So the fluid properties we're talking about are the density of the fluid, the viscosity of the fluid. So changing these will have an effect on the amount of losses. Then we're also talking about the flow properties, so which is the velocity. Okay, either you can have velocity and diameter, size given, cross section relations given, or you can have the flow rate given. So it's either ways. I can either put a V here or the flow rate Q here. And then we also need the information about the roughness of the pipe surface. So we denote that by epsilon. Okay, so this is roughness. So is the pipe surface rough or is it smooth? So if you polish, if you use some sort of abrasive technique to make it a shiny finish inside the pipe surface, you will definitely have less amount of loss because of the friction with the I mean, that's intuitive again. We'll discuss that more formally. And then the shape of the cross section. Okay, so our job will be to relate the fluid properties, flow properties, and geometrical properties with the losses that are happening in the flow. And then that losses, as we know, is equal to the pressure drop delta P divided by rho g. So that will help us find out the right pumping system for this situation. There are some other losses as well. And if you think about for the piping system, when let's say other losses. So let's say you have a bend in the pipe. This is a 90-degree bend. So the flow has to change direction. So in this case, there is some loss in energy as compared to the same size of pipe if the pipe was going straight. So these bends will have an associated loss with it. The next is valves. Okay, so you have seen valves which are, I mean, the easiest example is the tap. So you use the tap, you open the valve, the water starts flowing, you open it further, the water flow rate increases. So these valves are used to control the flow, or in many cases the flow rate. So whenever you have a valve, this will create some sort of resistance to the flow. So it will have an added loss. So if you had a flow with a valve in it, which is partially open, that may result in some loss. So you'll have to compensate that with a pump. Okay, so valves typically are denoted using these two opposing triangles. So this is sign for a gate valve. We'll talk about valves towards the later part of this discussion on the chapter. Next is sudden expansion and contraction. So if you have sudden expansion, so let's say you have a pipe of a certain diameter, and then suddenly the pipe diameter changes. You've connected two pipes of unequal diameters. So when the flow goes, I mean, there are complex dynamics that happen when the flow goes from the smaller pipe to the bigger pipe. But the net effect that we are interested in, as I just talked about, talked a couple of minutes ago, is to find out the amount of friction losses, or the I'm sorry, not friction, amount of the total losses that are happening in the flow. So if connecting two unequal diameter pipes results in a loss, energy loss, that has to be estimated. So we'll have to work on that as well in this discussion. Because remember, ultimately our goal is to relate the pressure drop delta P with the discharge or the volume flow rate. Okay, I'll call it LH friction. Okay. So the losses because of friction, and these are other losses. So we need to find these losses too. And finally, once we have estimated all the losses and so on, so we'll have to apply some sort of solve the problems. So we'll typically have problems where you have a pipeline, then you have a valve, the pipeline may be diameter may be increasing, and then decreasing again for some reason, and then finally you will want to have a pump to transport this. So the pump adds energy, and then to create the or to sustain the flow rate. So it may be required that for a given flow rate Q, you will have to calculate the pump power, or vice versa. You may also have situation where, for example, it may be a more complicated, complex system where you have a pipe splitting into two parts of, let's say, different diameters, and then something happens, and then they connect back. Okay. So that may also be that kind of a problem may also be there. So you may have to estimate the pump power in this kind of a situation. All right, so these kind of problems is what we'll be looking for. So we are developing some sort of understanding in all these situations to estimate the friction losses as well as other losses, so that we can finally find out delta P versus Q for these complex systems as well, not just a straight section of a pipe. Right, so how will we develop this approach? Okay, so what sort of an approach will we have? Earlier we talked about that typically in fluid mechanics problems we have two kinds of methods. One is theory, and the other is experiments with dimensional analysis. So theory was to use the integral relations or integral method or differential methods. Okay, so either the Reynolds transport theorem in integral methods or solving the Navier-Stokes equation if possible using differential methods. That's theory, but that in our viscous flows in ducts only works for laminar flows. Okay, and when the flow becomes turbulent, then we'll discuss this again later, that we cannot solve, or it becomes extremely difficult, if at all possible, to use these theoretical ideas. So we have to depend on the experiments to be able to approach problems which have turbulent flow in pipes. Okay, so when we say experiments with dimensional analysis, what we mean is we'll plot or we will generate charts or tables of relationship between delta P and Q. Okay, not really delta P and Q, because we're talking about using dimensional analysis. So we may have corresponding non-dimensional variables. So we'll call it the pi variable corresponding to delta P and the pi variable corresponding to Q is what we'll relate in using experiments. Okay, and using these charts and tables, we can then they can help us with designing piping systems. Okay, so in few cases we have theory, and in most cases we use experiments. Okay, I'll tell you why. And as I said that this only the theory only works for laminar, and this works for it works for both laminar and turbulent flow. Right. We have briefly talked about what a turbulent flow is, but let's talk a bit. I mean, in this discussion, we'll have a significant amount of time spent in 2 lectures from now on what turbulence is, because the classical Reynolds experiment that was done by Osborne Reynolds in a pipe is being used to understand the transition from laminar to turbulent flow. So this pipe flow experiments are used very commonly to understand turbulence. But anyways, let's briefly talk about what flow turbulence has to mean here for our case of pipe flows. So when I say laminar flow, then the word laminar comes from lamina. Laminas means layers. So when the flow Reynolds number is low, so for Reynolds number less than a value which is around 2300, what we see is that the flow is laminar. Okay. So the flow is layered. Okay, it's ordered. So it's a smooth, so two layers, any two layers will glide smoothly over each other. Any two layers. Okay, so this is like two solid objects moving over each other very smoothly. So in fact, I've got a picture here. So you can see this picture. So this is an example or a photo taken for laminar flow. You can see that it's a very transparent flow, very ordered. But if you increase the Reynolds number, well, let me tell you how Reynolds number is defined here. In fact, this is Reynolds number defined using the diameter of the pipe. So this is the characteristic velocity V times the diameter of the pipe divided by the kinematic viscosity nu of the fluid. So V here is defined as, because along the cross section the flow velocity changes from 0 near the walls to a maximum value near the center or at the center. So V is defined as the ratio of Q to A. So it's the volume flow rate divided by the area. That's area averaged velocity. So this is how we define Reynolds number here. So for the Reynolds number, when the Reynolds number becomes greater than 2300, so what we see is the flow becomes turbulent. So you can see in the second case, in case number B, the flow is very wavy, very chaotic, very disordered. Okay, so this is turbulent. This picture is taken from the textbook, and they have taken it from somewhere else. All right. So I've shared a couple of videos with you over Moodle. They are videos that already are available on YouTube. So please go through them. So they will help you understand. There are lots of interesting visualizations which will help us understand the transition from laminar to turbulent flow. So in this case, if I was to deal with for a given pipe size and fluid type, if I was to deal with very low flow rates, then I'll have laminar flow. But when I start increasing the flow rate, there'll be a transition point where the Reynolds number will increase from 2300, and then the flow will become turbulent. In fact, let's see if I can show you a video here. So let's see this video. So you can see that what we have here is there's a pipe, and in the center of the pipe you have this black line. So this black line corresponds to a dye. It's a colored fluid which is being injected into the flow as the flow is happening. So when the flow happens, it takes away this streak of dye with it, and you see this black line as the dye moves from left to right. And what is being done is gradually the volume flow rate is being increased. So basically the power of the pump is being increased gradually. So see what happens to the die when the flow rate increases or the Reynolds number increases. Now we can see that these waves start developing, and as the flow rate is increased further, these waves become much more prominent, and beyond the flow rate increasing very high, you see that there is an increased and enhanced mixing that starts in the flow. It's become extremely chaotic. So this is now a regime where the flow is completely turbulent. And if I go back in the video, it was very smooth and laminar. So a die, a material, a flow parcel which was at the center of the pipe stayed at the center. But when the flow became very turbulent, you can see that the parcels are very chaotic. It's just moving everywhere inside the pipe. Okay, so this is turbulence. Right. Let me share the board again with you. Right. So this for Reynolds number greater than 2300, the flow is turbulent. And it stays turbulent. I mean, no matter how much you increase Reynolds number, the flow will remain turbulent. As I said, in turbulent flow, the flow is chaotic. There is a lot of mixing. Even though the bulk flow is happening in the x direction, you see a lot of chaotic mixing. So the flow starts to move in the y direction or the radial direction as well, even though the pump is providing delta P only in the x direction. All right. So as I said, we'll have discussion about turbulence in 2 lectures from now. So we'll talk in more detail about what turbulence is and how to handle that, if at all possible theoretically. And if not, then what can we do about turbulent flow to understand it more in a more detail. Right. So let's summarize laminar versus turbulent. So the theoretical ideas that we have developed using integral and differential relations, they work well for laminar flow. So we'll study them first. Okay. Then we'll move on to the turbulent flows. So then we'll move on to turbulent flows, and that is where we'll use the ideas of experimentation and empirics to understand them further. All right. So let's solve a problem. Let's try to understand what is the behavior of general engineering flows that we deal with in real life. Right. So let's say the engineering flows that we encounter in real life, are they laminar or turbulent? I mean, are they mostly laminar or turbulent? Okay, that's a valid question. So let's solve a problem. This is example number 6.1 from your textbook. So you have a pipe with a 5 centimeter diameter, and you have flow happening of two fluids. One is, I mean, we have to consider two cases. One is for air and the other is for water. And the temperature is 20 degrees centigrade. This is flow temperature. Right. So what we have to find out is at what flow velocity will there be a transition from laminar to turbulent flow. Let me increase the font size. So at what flow velocity will there be a transition from laminar to turbulent flow for these two cases? So let's start with the first case, that is for air. Okay, so the Reynolds number, the critical Reynolds number, as we just talked about, is approximately 2300. So the transition from laminar to turbulent flow happens inside a pipe at the Reynolds number of 2300. Now this 2300 number is not, is a very sharp change. You don't see a discontinuous change from at this particular number. In some cases, we may see the flow may become turbulent at around 2000. In some cases, you may see that the flow will stay might stay laminar for Reynolds number till, let's say, 3000. But this is the average that we have seen typically when the flow starts becoming turbulent. So we'll discuss in which cases the flow may become turbulent before this or after this number. But let's say that this is the average around which the flow transitions from laminar to turbulent. So we'll consider this as the discontinuity point. So let's see at what flow velocity does the flow transition from below 2300 to above 2300 Reynolds number. So Reynolds number, as we said, is defined using the area average velocity V times the pipe diameter divided by the flow kinematic viscosity. So for this to be 2300 for air, if you find out the value of nu, d is given as 0.5 centimeter. Sorry, that's 0.05 meters. So using this, what you'll find is your V will come out to be 0.7 meters per second. Okay, that's again the area average. For flow velocities below 0.7 meters per second, the flow will be laminar, and for the flow velocities, well, air in this case, above 0.7 meters per second, that is turbulent. And this is equal to 2.5 kilometer per hour. If you want to think of this in terms of how fast the wind blows when you're moving in a car. So 2.5 is nothing. Actually, walk faster than that in many cases. So it's a very slow velocity. So most of the airflow situations that you will deal with will definitely be more than this. So what that means is most of the engineering problems that we'll solve or that we'll have to work with airflow in a pipe, in this kind of pipe, 5 centimeter is a decent size for airflows. The flow will be turbulent because the flow is mostly turbulent for airflows in pipes. Let's check for water. So if I do the same thing, Vd by nu for water as 2300. So this will give me V for water as 0.046 meters per second. Okay, that's only around 4.5 centimeters per second. Again, that's a very low flow velocity for flow of water in a pipe. Okay, so what we conclude from this is that most of the engineering flows, and this was a typical example. I mean, you may have a much smaller diameter of a pipe, but this is what typically is being used in the industry. So most of the engineering problems that we'll work with will have turbulent flow. Should we say most engineering problems of internal flows will be turbulent flow problems. All right. So now there'll be confusion. There'll be confusion here that if that is the case, then why do we talk about laminar flows at all? Why not just start studying turbulent flows? Okay, but it is still important to start with laminar flows, and the reason is because that will help us understand the theoretical ideas first. Okay, so that will help us start developing the theoretical ideas, and that is not the only case. I mean, the aim here is not to just learn a lot of theory. It's also to be able to apply that to engineering problems. So what happens is in turbulent flows we do a lot of empirical studies. So we develop lots of correlations in turbulent flows, but that motivation of what sort of correlations should be developed. I mean, you will have some Reynolds number to the power something and so on. So the intuition on how correlations should be developed is still coming from these theoretical ideas. Okay, it does help us. These theoretical discussions will help us understand the intuition behind developing correlations. And the other is, of course, I mean, it helps us understand the physics of the flow. If I was simply to do lots of experiments and then draw some curves or graphs or develop tables with some numbers, that will not help us understand the physics at all. So through these theoretical discussions on laminar flows, we'll be able to understand from the results or the process, we'll be able to understand some physics as well of the flow. So that is the reason we need to start with studying laminar flows. But then, of course, for practical importance, it's mostly going to be turbulent flow ideas that we'll be using, and those relations we'll be making use of a lot of correlations and empirical studies for solving problems. Right. So I think we have. See how long it has been. So it's almost time now. So we will stop here, and then the rest of the discussion we'll continue in the next lecture. Thank you.